Now, yesterday we reported live from Antarctica about how climate change unfolding there is already affecting the whole planet. We saw parts of a glacier collapse into the sea, and we travelled by ship to parts of the continent which should have been frozen solid with ice at this time of year. Well, our science correspondent Martin Stew is still in the Antarctic, and today he put some of our findings on climate change to Sir Keir Starmer. Well, Martin is travelling with British Antarctic Survey. And Martin, they are leaders, aren't they, in their field?
Well, yeah, when it comes to global polar science, the UK actually punches a fair bit above its weight, not least thanks to a large amount of taxpayer money, which funds things like the ship I'm stood on now, as well as physical bases on Antarctica. And a big report, a parliamentary report which came out this week, said that offers good value for money for two reasons. The first is geopolitical, in that we need to have a physical presence in this continent, and the second is to do with the value of the climate science which is being done here. So when I got a chance to speak to the Prime Minister earlier today, I was keen to put to him whether he was listening enough to that science, particularly in whether he is preparing the country enough for the changes which could be coming down the track if we start to see large levels of sea level rises. The Climate Change Committee not long ago said there has been no change in addressing the risk with the change in government. Are you doing enough?
Yeah, I think we are. I think there's been a massive change. If you look at what used to be a cross-party consensus on net zero, unfortunately that's breaking down. This is a real tragedy.
But that's net zero. We're talking about adaptation here, and that's where the Climate Change Committee is very clear that there has been no change.
Well, I don't accept that. I think we're making the necessary adaptations. But look, is it a challenge? Of course it is. But we have to rise to that challenge.
Well, the Prime Minister was also keen to point out that there is a lack of global leadership at the moment. I asked him about whether Donald Trump is doing enough. You can hear more of that interview actually on News at 10 tonight.
And Martin, there was another worrying report out today, wasn't it? That really hammers home the challenges the area is facing.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been amazed by the wildlife here and just how it can cope with the freezing temperatures. It turns out, though, one thing it can't cope with is the warming, and we are seeing a worrying trend. As graceful through the Southern Ocean as they are cute on land. They've evolved to weather temperatures down to -60, shielding chicks from Antarctic blizzards. What they can't cope with or control is the warming ocean. These emperors are the largest type of penguin. They can weigh up to 45 kilograms. But there's a problem. They can't breed on the land. They need sea ice, and that is shrinking fast. It needs to stay frozen and stable for at least 8 months. If the ice starts to break up before the chicks are strong enough to swim, they'll drown. How sad would it be if we lost these guys?
I think it'd be catastrophic. They're just so charismatic, and the emperor being an iconic species.
This penguin has become separated from his colony. Most live so remotely, the only way to monitor them is from space. By studying the telltale staining on the ice from penguin poo.
This is a particularly large decrease.
Peter Fretwell has been keeping an eye on numbers, and news is even worse than feared.
The populations have decreased by around 22% over a sector of Antarctica which contains about a third of all the emperor penguins.
That's more than twice as fast as modelling done across the whole continent just 7 years ago.
This is very worrying because our predictions of their future are quite dire anyway. We're predicting that there'll be very, very few left by the end of the century. So to see that they're doing even worse than that is quite an eye-opener, really.
Even in areas where sea ice has held firm, it appears storms, rainfall and greater exposure to predators like orca has hit colonies too. And they're not the only threats. These are Gentoo penguins. Unlike emperors, they don't need sea ice to breed, but they do have a challenge they're facing. Bird flu. It's come to Antarctica. At the moment, fortunately, mortality rates in birds are low, but Chilean scientists are watching the population closely.
If you are infected with the avian flu, is produce the mortality in human, high mortality. And for this we need to have a good biosecurity protocols for field activities in Antarctica.
You don't need to look far to see species succeeding when allowed. Having been hunted to near extinction for their pelts, furry seals are roaring back. Proof nature finds a way even in this brutal environment if we give it a chance. Martin Stew, ITV News, Antarctica.